Be me. Greater than 22, name's Ethan, small-town kid. Moved to New York after high school. Pockets held only a few $100s. But my head carried one big dream. To work hard, study, live on my own. I believed effort would always be enough. At first everything felt like a movie. City lights glowing brighter than stars. Crowds rushing like rivers through the streets. Subways rattling deep under the ground. New faces and endless noise everywhere. I thought I had finally arrived here. A small-town boy chasing a future. But reality showed its teeth quickly after. Jobs were scarce. Rent climbed higher daily. My savings burned away faster than smoke. One week, I handed out flyers at Times Square. The next week, I scrubbed dishes in a bar. Nights stretched into mornings filled with exhaustion. Hands cracked open from chemicals and water. Yet I kept moving, refusing to stop. Days blurred together into long exhaustion. I tried holding my head high proudly. But the city tested me without mercy. One night on the subway, I was robbed. My wallet gone with the last bills inside. I stared at the empty seat in disbelief. Heart pounding like I had lost everything. At the bar, my boss shouted constantly. Called me slow, said I'd never last. I swallowed the words, kept scrubbing plates harder. Back at my apartment, walls shook nightly. Neighbors partying loud until morning hours. Sleep came in broken scraps of minutes. One evening I sat on the floor, staring at the cracked paint silently, wondering if I should give up already. The thought of returning home crushed me. I had promised myself I wouldn't fail. I had promised my mom I'd prove it. But promises felt heavy in that silence, and doubt wrapped around me like chains. Winter arrived colder than I imagined before. I picked up courier shifts to survive, running through snow with heavy bags daily. Wind cutting through my thin jacket sharply. Shoes soaked, socks freezing against my skin. That night orders were delayed for hours. I stood outside trembling, body nearly numb. By the time food finally reached the customer, he opened the door and frowned coldly. No thank you, just slammed it shut instantly. I stood in the hallway shaking violently. Rage and hopelessness tangled in my chest. I wanted to scream into the night, but nothing left my throat but silence. I leaned against the wall, breath uneven, thinking maybe I had reached my end, thinking maybe going home was the only way. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from my little sister appeared. Her words glowed brighter than the city itself. I believe in you. You're my hero. I stared at the screen in silence. A photo came attached with her words. Me carrying her on my shoulders as kids. Her tiny hands gripping my hair tightly. Our smiles wide, our world still simple. Tears blurred the phone in my frozen hands. I realized if I fell here tonight, she would lose the example she believed in. She needed to see I could survive, even when everything felt broken inside. That thought lit a spark in me again, small but strong enough to keep me upright. I wiped my face with shaking gloves, breathed deep in the cold hallway, and whispered to myself I wouldn't quit. The city could break my wallet. It could bruise my body and pride, but it wouldn't crush the promise I made. To her, to Mom, and to myself. That night, I went home shivering, but with a fire inside that refused to die. Next morning, I woke with heavy eyes. Barely slept, but forced myself upright anyway. Pulled on the same worn jacket slowly. Slung my backpack over tired shoulders. Stepped into the freezing city at 7. Each step felt heavier than the last. But her words echoed in my head constantly. You're my hero, don't forget it. I carried those words through crowded streets. Through subway rides that smelled of metal. Through kitchens filled with steam and shouting. Every time I wanted to quit suddenly, I pictured her smile in that photo. The way she believed in me blindly. And somehow my body kept moving forward. The city hadn't grown kinder overnight, but my heart had grown stronger quietly. I wasn't fighting only for myself anymore. I was fighting for the sister who believed, for the mother who prayed back home, and for the boy inside me who dreamed. Strange things began happening after that shift. A customer left a massive tip suddenly, with a note saying, "Thanks for braving the weather." His words felt warmer than the money itself. The kind of warmth I had been missing. Another night at the bar, a regular noticed me. He slid a small book across the counter, said quietly, "You look like you forgot how to dream." I held that book like fragile treasure. Its pages smelled of hope and dust. Even my noisy neighbors surprised me once. They knocked on my door one evening, invited me for dinner with simple smiles, said they noticed I'd been living on instant noodles for a week straight without real meals. I sat at their table awkward but grateful. The laughter around me felt unreal at first, but slowly I let it sink into my bones. The city that once only hurt me was beginning to show another face quietly. Life didn't suddenly turn easy overnight. Bills still stacked high on my desk. Work shifts still drained every ounce of strength. The subway still smelled of rust and sweat. But my perspective had shifted completely. I no longer counted only the hardships. I started noticing the tiny sparks instead. A kind word from a stranger passing. A smile from a child in the elevator. A warm meal shared when least expected. Those details stitched themselves into my days and kept me standing when exhaustion pressed hard. I realized survival wasn't just about strength. It was about refusing to stop believing. Believing tomorrow could hold something better, even if today nearly broke you apart. So I kept going, day after day. Hands still cracked, eyes still heavy, but with a fire no cold could touch. Because resilience had taken root inside me. I often thought back to my small town. Quiet streets, familiar faces, steady routines. Part of me longed for that safety again, but another part knew I couldn't return yet. I had promised too much to myself. To prove I could make it here. To show my sister that dreams matter, even when the world feels against you. So I stayed in New York stubbornly. Kept working 2 jobs, sometimes 3. Studied late at night with burning eyes. Read that book the bar regular gave me. Its words whispered possibilities into my head. Reminded me that hope is fuel, not weakness. Slowly I began to believe again. Not in an easy path, but a possible one. And possibility was enough to carry me further. Every shift became more than survival now. It became proof I hadn't surrendered. Proof that I was still building forward. The city kept testing me in waves. Snowstorms buried sidewalks knee-deep quickly. Delivery bags grew heavier with each block. My breath turned white against the frozen air. Sometimes doors slammed without a single thank you. Other times strangers surprised me with kindness. A cup of tea handed through a doorway. A smile saying stay warm out there. Those moments reminded me not everyone was cold. That even in New York warmth existed. At the bar things shifted slowly as well. The bartender who once yelled constantly now nodded when I worked with speed. Still harsh, but with quieter respect beneath. I started to feel less invisible there. Less like a body filling space at night, and more like a person proving himself. The grind never ended, but perspective mattered. And I chose to see growth, not just pain. Nights alone were the hardest to bear. I'd lie on my mattress staring at cracks, listening to neighbors laugh through thin walls. Their joy felt like another world entirely, while I counted coins to make rent barely. Sometimes hunger gnawed at me quietly, and I wondered if I'd sacrificed too much. But then my phone would buzz suddenly. A message from my sister back home. She asked if I was eating enough. Told me she bragged about me to friends. Called me the bravest person she knew. Those words patched holes inside my chest. They reminded me why I kept going. Not for glory, not for comfort, but because someone believed I could endure. And if she could believe it so deeply, I had no right to throw it away. So I clenched my fists, breathed deep, and promised tomorrow I'd rise again. Spring arrived with wet sidewalks and busy crowds. Flowers blooming between cracks in the pavement. And something in me started blooming too. I noticed my steps felt steadier each day. Work was still grueling, shifts still endless. But I wasn't drowning in the same despair. Small victories kept me afloat like rafts. A manager thanked me for covering late. A customer actually remembered my name once. A stranger in the subway offered me a seat. Tiny details, but they built a new rhythm. A rhythm of not just surviving, but belonging. I began saving even small amounts of money. Coins turning into bills tucked into an envelope. For the first time, I felt control returning. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And ownership of progress made me stronger. Each sunrise reminded me I was still here. Still standing in the city that tried to break me. There were still nights when doubt returned, creeping in like shadows through cracked blinds. I'd ask myself if I was wasting years, if this grind would ever lead somewhere better. But then I'd remember the frozen hallway, the slammed door, the photo from my sister, the moment I almost gave up completely, and the fire that kept me from falling. That memory became my anchor in storms. Because if I survived that night broken, I could survive the rest of them too. Resilience wasn't about being fearless at all. It was about shaking but standing anyway. About rising when comfort begged you to stop. And every time I got back up, I proved something quietly to myself again. That maybe strength isn't about winning always. Maybe it's about refusing to stay down, even when the world hands you reasons to quit. Summer in the city brought heavy heat, air thick with exhaust and rushing crowds. My courier shifts doubled under the sun. Sweat poured down my back endlessly. But I kept moving with stubborn rhythm. Each delivery felt like another mile conquered. Some clients tipped generously with kind smiles. Others slammed doors without looking at me. I learned not to measure worth by reactions, but by the effort I gave each time. At night, the bar grew louder than ever. Tourists flooding in with money and noise. I washed glasses until my arms went numb. Bartender barked orders, but less than before. Small nods of approval slipped through his mask. Those nods became small fuel for me. They meant I wasn't invisible anymore. That even the harshest voices could soften slightly. And that maybe I was building respect slowly. One evening after work, I walked home slowly. City lights flickered on wet streets around me. My body ached, but my mind stayed restless. I thought about the book from the bar regular. Its words circled in my head like echoes, reminding me to keep dreaming despite exhaustion. I opened it again in my small room. Pages smelled of paper and possibility. Stories of people who started with nothing, who fought through endless nights like mine. Each chapter felt like a quiet conversation, telling me I wasn't alone in this battle. I underlined sentences with a dull pencil, writing notes in the margins with tired hands. The book became a lantern in the dark. Its light small, but enough to guide me. And I realized sometimes hope comes this way. Not as thunder, but as a fragile flame. A flame you protect until it grows steady. Autumn leaves painted the streets golden and red. Air crisp, morning sharper against my skin. I felt a shift in myself quietly. Not victory, but a deeper kind of steadiness. Neighbors greeted me more often in hallways. Even invited me again to share dinners. I laughed awkwardly over pasta at their table, realizing I hadn't felt family warmth in months. Their kindness reminded me I wasn't forgotten. That even in a city of millions, someone could still notice when you struggled. At work, the bartender surprised me suddenly. He told me I was faster than before. His words blunt, but they carried respect. I tucked that moment into my chest carefully, because recognition in New York was rare, and sometimes rare things carry the most weight. I walked home under streetlights, smiling faintly, knowing the grind hadn't broken me yet, and maybe, just maybe, it never would. Winter crept back with bitter wind again. I braced myself for another season of trials. Memories of frozen deliveries haunted my mind, but this time I felt different inside. I wasn't the same boy from last year. I was tougher, steadier, less afraid to bend. Still, the cold nights pressed against my bones. One delivery ran late in heavy snow. I knocked on a stranger's door, shivering badly. This time the man opened with concern. He handed me a blanket before the tip. Said, "No one should be out in this." Tears stung my frozen eyes instantly, because the smallest kindness felt enormous then. I carried that warmth through the storm, reminded again that humanity still existed here, that even in a city so relentless, people could choose compassion in simple ways, and that compassion could carry someone for miles. As the year closed, I looked back at the boy who arrived with a dream, pockets nearly empty, heart filled with hope, and at the man I was becoming now, scarred hands, tired eyes, but stronger spirit. The city hadn't given me anything freely. Every smile, every dollar, every breath was earned. And maybe that was the point all along. To carve resilience out of endless struggle. To teach me strength beyond simple comfort. Sometimes I hated New York with passion. Its noise, its cruelty, its unforgiving pace. Yet sometimes I loved it for the same. Because it forced me to grow unshakable roots. And I realized I didn't need perfection here. I only needed to keep standing daily, to keep rising no matter the weight. That was survival, and that was enough for me. There were still nights I doubted again, lying awake listening to the city breathe, sirens wailing, cars rushing, neighbors laughing loudly. I wondered if my efforts would ever matter, if I was just another shadow passing. But then I'd think of my sister, her words, her photo, her belief in me, and doubt loosened its grip a little. Because even if the city forgot me, she never would, and that was enough. On mornings when I wanted to stay in bed, I pictured her smile lighting up proudly, and my body moved even through fatigue. Small anchors like that saved me often. Anchors made of love, not of money. Reminders that strength comes from connection, not from pride or isolation alone. And with each reminder, I rose again, ready to face the city one more time. Spring returned with brighter skies above, and with it a lighter feeling inside. Work still drained me, bills still piled high, but my steps no longer dragged as before. I had learned to find rhythm in chaos, to take small joys wherever they appeared. A kind word from a stranger in line, a laugh shared with a coworker after closing, the smell of fresh bread from the corner bakery. Tiny details stitched hope into ordinary days. I even saved enough for a train ticket. Went home to see my family briefly. My sister ran to me at the station, hugged me tight, calling me her hero again. Her eyes glowed with pride unshaken. And in that moment, every struggle felt lighter, because I saw exactly why I endured, and why quitting had never been an option. My fight wasn't just mine, it was ours. Summer heat returned heavy and relentless. Streets buzzing with tourists and blaring horns. I ran deliveries through the crowded avenues, sweat dripping, shoulders sore from heavy bags. Yet this time I carried myself differently, not as a victim, but as a fighter. One client slipped me a cold drink, said simply, "You're working harder than anyone today." Those words stuck with me longer than expected, because recognition, even brief, meant survival sometimes. At the bar I moved with practiced ease, hands quick, mind sharper than before. Bartender no longer yelled like he once did. Instead, he trusted me to handle rushes. Trust felt like gold in that loud room. I walked home under buzzing streetlights at night, body aching, but spirit steady and proud, knowing the boy who once wanted to quit had become a man who kept rising anyway. Autumn winds swept through the city again, leaves spinning across cracked sidewalks endlessly. I found myself reflecting more than before, on the years spent struggling to stand here, on the nights I nearly surrendered to doubt, and the mornings I forced myself to rise. I realized strength wasn't in never falling. It was in choosing to rise after each fall. The city had shaped me through fire, breaking me, then forcing me to rebuild stronger. Each scar on my hands told that story. Each sleepless night carried proof of resilience. Neighbors still greeted me warmly now. Coworkers treated me with respect finally. Even strangers offered kindness without reason sometimes. And all those details stitched into one truth: that life may never be easy here, but I had become unbreakable within it. And that was a victory all its own. Winter crept close once more with sharp winds. This time I met it with steady resolve. I remembered the boy from the frozen hallway, ready to quit, wallet empty, spirit cracked. And I realized how far I had come. I wasn't rich, I wasn't free of struggle, but I was no longer defeated inside. I had learned how to bend without breaking, how to find light in the smallest places. A smile, a book, a message from home. All of it stitched into my survival. The city still tested me every day, but I carried its lessons like armor. Lessons of resilience, grit, and relentless will. And I knew I could face storms again, because storms no longer terrified me as before. They reminded me of who I had become, someone stronger than the doubts that haunted me. Looking back now, it all feels unreal. The nights on the floor staring at walls, the slammed doors, the freezing deliveries, the doubt, and the single message that pulled me back. "I believe in you, you're my hero." My sister's words carried me through storms and turned weakness into steady resilience inside. I learned that strength isn't perfection at all. It's standing again when falling feels easier. It's rising when every voice says quit. The city never softened completely for me, but I no longer needed it to. because I found fire within my own chest. And that fire burned brighter than the dark. Now I carry my scars with pride. Proof that I endured, proof that I rose. So I'll ask you this honestly. Have you ever wanted to give up, but one small detail kept you standing? Share your story in the comments below. And if my journey spoke to you, leave a like, so others know they're not alone in the fight.